Chantilly. I'm Kyla Nguyen,
And I'm Bianca Campoverde. Today is June 9th, 2020.
and here are your weekly announcements.
Corn Streams is a bi-weekly live stream hosted on Facebook Live on Thursdays and Sundays at 7 p.m. by School Board Member at Large Abrar Ramesh and Student Representative to the School Board Kimberly Boateng.
Corn Streams strive to be a platform for students and parents to ask questions, raise concerns, and bring ideas during this difficult time. These live streams were created to ensure that information is made accessible as possible to students and families. The hope is for students and their families to know that they are accounted for and that there's a safe place for them to ask questions that will hopefully ease their anxieties during this troubling time.
Let's go to Zaria for different ways to stay in contact during this pandemic.
As Corona has limited our way of contacting and staying in touch with friends and family, the Nightly News decided to share a few creative and fun ways to stay in contact. We know that not everyone has an iPhone, so we made sure to include apps in different ways that everyone could use. The first creative way is the app Zoom. Zoom is accessible to everyone from the age 4 and up. The process to set up your account is also very easy. The app allows for you to set up video conferences, instant message, and audio calls, all while staying in the app. You're able to have up to 100 people on a call all at once, and Zoom has a rating of 4.5 out of 5 stars in the App Store. And as a bonus, Zoom is accessible to all devices. The second way is the app Squad. Squad is very similar to Zoom, but there are a few different features. Some of you may like Squad more than Zoom because of these features. Squad lets you start a room, invite your friends, and screen share videos from your favorite streaming services like Netflix, Disney+, Hulu, TikTok, YouTube, and much more. This app is a cool way to have a virtual party, study session, or a cute movie night with your significant other. You can video call with up to 9 people all at the same time. Squad works on all devices and is available to everyone from ages 12 and up. Squad, just like Zoom, has received a 4.5 out of 5 stars in the App Store. So if you're interested in watching a movie or show, maybe even TikToks with a friend or family member while in quarantine, you should definitely check this app out. The third way is to send a virtual quarantine care package through email. I personally had a friend send me one and made my whole week. In the package, you can include some movies or shows you recommend while watching in quarantine. Maybe share a music playlist so they can jam out while doing homework. Include some fun games that they can download that will help them to pass time. You can include some fun activities you think the other person may enjoy. Lastly, you can include some pictures of your friend's celebrity crush. You and your friend could continue to check in with each other through these packages. This doesn't have to be a one-time thing. You can send a package every 2 weeks, which will give you time to help you come up with new ideas to send the other person. Lastly, we decided to go old school just in case anyone doesn't have enough storage on any of their actual devices. You can write a cute little letter to one of your friends or family members. You can include what you've been doing while in quarantine, exchange ideas on how to keep each other entertained, or just a little inspiration that will help make the other person's day. Maybe send pictures with the letter to help them visualize how you're spending your time. Who knows, you might just get one back. You can include jokes to make them laugh, say reasons for why you miss them, and you can write down your favorite memory with them or a memory you can't wait to make once we're out of quarantine. With this one, you can be as creative as you want. Remember, Chargers, while there are still many other ways to stay in contact with others during quarantine, these are just a few ideas. We hope some of these ideas were helpful and will help you to get in contact with your friends and family. Stay safe and healthy, Chargers. This has been Zaria Stovall for the Nightly News. Now back to you.
Thanks, Zaria. Let's take a look at how the newspaper and yearbook are managing with getting their work done during this time out of school.
I'm the editor-in-chief of the yearbook along with Julia Chang. We were positive that the book was still going to be printed, and we were reassured that by our teacher from the very beginning. So when the day we found out that school was going to close, we went to school to get the journalism laptops so we could give it to the team leaders to work from home, because we had to have our last deadline during the quarantine time. So they were still able to work on InDesign at home, and they would PDF us the pages so we could comment on it. It was kind of hard because usually they print out their pages for us to write marks on, but now we had to be like, okay, in your bottom right corner in the third sentence, remove the comma, which is more time consuming than we're used to. The printing plant, Herff Jones, is closed right now, so it's kind of worrying because we have some pending docs or pending pages where we have to wait for them to open again to send back to us our pages that we submitted the first time before we submit again for good for the final version. So the time that we have to really wrap things up is really short. The hard part was not knowing how distribution will be. Every year on distribution day, everyone wakes up early around 5 and gets to school around 6, and we take the books out from trucks, boxes and boxes. It's always a good time opening that first box and opening that first book as a yearbook staff. Then spending the whole day giving it to people in the school and getting their reactions from it. It's a really amazing feeling, and although that process won't look the same during quarantine, we're still happy that we're still able to deliver the books and give students something that was promised to them. We're glad that we were still able to finish everything on time and pretty much the way we wanted it, because our vision for how the book was going to end didn't change that much, just because we had already finished most of the book when quarantine started. So now the underclassmen are working on the senior book, where all the underclassmen work on kind of making a mini yearbook that's only for the yearbook staff, and every team does 2 pages on a senior in yearbook. And it's just a really nice kind of parting gift for the seniors who are leaving.
During the break, Newspaper was thinking of different ways we could stay connected. One idea that popped up was kind of creating this diary entry / journal series called the Coronavirus Diaries, where students and staff submit entries of basically just a day in their life during quarantine. It's just a great way to kind of show everyone that we aren't alone during this time, because this is uncharted territory and a lot of us don't know what we're doing. So it's just a really great way to stay interconnected. What we're doing for our April / May issue is everyone on staff is writing a coronavirus diary entry. We weren't able to complete our April issue as initially planned because we do need to interview students at school. So our April issue kind of went haywire, which is why we're doing the coronavirus diaries instead. And we will be having a senior goodbye as our very last issue. Our March issue magazines came in on March 13th, and we were supposed to distribute it on that Friday, but unfortunately because school was closed, we weren't able to do that. Journalism was my one class that even while school was closed during that month, I was still working on it. Everyone on staff, we were still talking to each other and discussing ideas. And so I definitely felt connected to the other staff members. When you're not seeing people every single day, you kind of lose those contacts unless you really work to maintain them. So these diaries are kind of just a way of connecting our community together and reminding everyone that we're still here. I hope it'll allow us to kind of grow as human beings because we're able to just listen to what they're saying. A lot of times we're so obsessed with talking and kind of getting our point across, we forget to listen.
Now, let's go to Thomas for the final Movie Dudes of the year.
Hey everybody, this is Thomas Digby from the Movie Dudes. Well, we have officially reached the end of the year, and since I'm graduating soon, this will officially be my last episode of Movie Dudes. So to celebrate, I thought it would be fun to count down my top 5 favorite movies of all time. The movies that I absolutely love and think that other people should watch. There are so many movies that I wish I could have talked about, but unfortunately, they just couldn't make the list, so I apologize in advance. So let's get started. American Beauty. Lester Burnham is a 42-year-old man who lives in a suburban neighborhood with his wife Carolyn and his daughter Jane. He seems to have a normal life with a nice house and a decent job, but he feels like he's missing something. This leads him to have a midlife crisis which not only affects his family, but himself as well. The first time I watched this movie was during the summer of last year, and I'll never forget being absolutely blown away. The plot is pretty simple, but it's really the characters that drive the story, and that wouldn't be possible if it weren't for these incredible performances. These actors might not be household names, but that just shows how these are the best performances of their careers. I know in recent years that this movie has gotten some backlash for its content, its sense of pretentiousness, and of course, Kevin Spacey, who despite all his wrongdoings, definitely deserved his Best Actor Oscar. But that shouldn't be the case. This movie is about what defines real beauty, and how even the smallest things in life still have more meaning than people would expect.
Starting at number 5 on my list, I put Ocean's 11, starring George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, and Julia Roberts. I think the first thing to talk about for Ocean's is its all-star cast. I don't think you can watch this film and not recognize at least one of the actors, and they're all great. Each actor plays a specific character type that is kind of cartoony, but the actors make them seem like real people. Each character can be described in about one sentence, which I think honestly adds to the fun and just makes them larger-than-life personas. I think that George Clooney and Brad Pitt could honestly be the next Paul Newman and Robert Redford just due to their chemistry. The chemistry is so good, and I think it's one of the things that puts it on my number 5 spot. The premise is that it's a standard heist film, so it has a heist film structure, which I honestly think adds to it. The structure is standard because it's a good structure, so that's why everybody uses it. And this was one of the first heist films I had seen, so the structure really worked for me, and it was still fresh and new. The general synopsis is that Danny Ocean, played by George Clooney, is gathering a team of 11 men to rob the largest casino in Vegas. They go about telling this story in small bite-sized chunks, so they don't tell you the entire plan, which always kept me guessing and wondering what they're actually doing. And it had a couple of really good twists at the end, which had me piecing together the film in my head a couple hours after it finished.
If I were to rank these based on overall quality, this would easily take number 1. Whiplash. Andrew Neiman is an aspiring drummer who attends the top music school in the country. One day, he's selected to join the school's top studio band led by its most prestigious teacher, Terrence Fletcher. When he gets the chance to show off his skills, Fletcher starts pushing him over the edge, putting him in so much pain, but Andrew won't stop until he reaches the top. I can't think of any other movie where literally everything is done perfectly. Not only is the story really engaging, but it's also very intense and nerve-wracking, not only from the editing and cinematography, but from these incredible performances. Miles Teller had his whole career ahead of him before it quickly went downhill, but he'll always be remembered for his leading role. J.K. Simmons not only gives an amazing performance, but definitely the best of his career. Fletcher is such an unlikable character, but JK's performance is so aggressive and over the top when delivering his insults that it's impossible not to laugh at them. Despite being a really fun and entertaining movie, underneath all that is a message about how we all strive to be successful.
For the 4th film on my list, I have Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first film in the Indiana Jones trilogy. This is a personal favorite from my childhood, and because of that, there's a lot of nostalgia behind it. That being said, I don't think anybody can argue that it's not a great film. Unfortunately, most people have seen it, so there isn't a whole lot for me to talk about. But for those of you who haven't seen it, go watch it now. Yes, right now. You're in quarantine. It's on Netflix. Watch it. For those of you who are sticking around, I'll go over it briefly. It stars peak 80s Harrison Ford in all his glory. I don't think I've ever related more to these college students. Ford plays Indiana Jones, a professor, but more importantly an archaeologist. The character is basically Han Solo, but in World War II. Like Star Wars, it's based off 50s adventure books, but with a more Spielberg vibe. It starts with Indiana Jones traversing the South American jungle. He dodges booby traps while navigating ancient burial grounds. It's very iconic. It feels like a proper adventure. The conflict is pretty simple. Indy has to race the Nazis to find the Holy Ark, which contains the Ten Commandments. I really like the religious aspects of this film. It's very mystical and monumental. It feels more like the early depictions of the Christian God, in which God is all-powerful and controls the forces of both good and evil. It's very interesting. It's not something you see very often. That being said, I think that's all I've got to say about this classic. If you still haven't seen it, what are you doing? Go watch it! Right now, pause the video and go watch it. Well, now that they're gone, let's continue the list.
The Breakfast Club. One of my personal favorite subgenres is the coming-of-age movie. There's just something inspiring and relatable about having younger protagonists face challenges that we all have to face at some point in our lives. Coming-of-age movies can go in two directions. They can either be really good or really bad. But anyway, back to The Breakfast Club. This is definitely my favorite coming-of-age movie of all time. The story of 5 teens from different cliques spending a Saturday in detention might sound boring, but trust me when I say it's anything but. One of this movie's biggest strengths is its minimal cast, not only for their amazing performances, but it helps give the characters a lot more development. Almost any teen can relate to at least one of the main characters in any way, shape, or form. John Hughes is great at writing movies with relatable characters and a unique sense of humor, each different from the next. But this is my personal favorite not only because it has a lot more drama, but because of how it does so much with so little.
Now the films start getting a whole lot beefier. For my 3rd film, I had 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now we did already review this in our 2nd episode, Best Space Films, but in the time provided, you really just cannot do it justice. So here's a proper review of this monument of a film. 2001 is a critic's movie in every regard. Although you could deep dive into the themes and ideas presented, you could just watch it, and that in and of itself is highly enjoyable. That being said, if you're looking for a casual viewing, this is not what you should watch. It's about 3 hours, and the pacing is very slow. A lot of the shots are spaceships moving, or people walking around, or spaceships landing. Now, I really enjoy this, but I understand that's not for everybody. Now, if you don't like slow pacing or not a lot of dialogue, and you're not a huge fan of movies or like the language of cinema, then this probably isn't going to be your film. Go watch like Indiana Jones or Ocean's 11. Now that that's over, I'll cover the film itself. As for the plot, honestly, I'd say it's best to go in blind. Often on first watch, the long moments seem really long, so the unexpected changes in the scene might be what keeps you watching and invested. That being said, I'm going to be general. The basic plot is the story of the monolith, a large black rectangle. It's incredibly simple in design and yet incredibly alien and otherworldly. Something not made by nature or by man. We start with one of the most famous shots in movie history. It's hard to describe due to its simplicity, but it's gorgeous. We see the moon, obscuring center frame, and then the camera pan up to reveal the earth and then the sun. Meanwhile, the score is just blaring in the background. It's an incredibly powerful shot, mostly due to the music, which is explosive and grand. Many theorize as to what the shot actually means, but most agree that it represents man and life itself. Which, I mean, it's a lot to draw from one shot, but it goes to show how deep the movie really is. Almost any scene can be looked at with this intense analytical eye, and find some detail, thematic or otherwise. After this shot, we cut to gorillas. Yes, gorillas in the desert. I don't know how long it lasts, but we watch gorillas for a while, and they just do, gorilla things, like walk around, eat, drink, fight, like gorilla stuff. Then they discover the monolith. What transpires is very weird. Again, it's hard to describe, but on paper, it's the ape's reaction to the monolith, but it feels incredibly strange. It feels very uncomfortable and eerie. Then you cut to the distant future in which mankind has mastered space travel. It's pretty jarring to say the least, but that's where my description of the plot ends. I think the part that I just described is a pretty good taster for the rest of the film. It's kind of boring. I mean, I don't find it boring, but I understand why people would. So if you get through that, it's only uphill from there. Now, I think it's very important that I tell you how I watched this film. I watched it in 4K at the Alamo Drafthouse Theater in Ashburn. The screen was so wide I needed 3 projectors just to fill it, and the speakers were so loud they sounded like rockets. They served food and drink to you while you were watching, and they were very strict on rules. No talking and no phone use. If you did that, you'd be kicked out. In short, the system was perfect for watching a film such as 2001. The screen was immaculately detailed, and the speakers were just incredible. I think it's awesome to have the music so loud, plus it really puts you in the film. Also, I ordered some tea, so I drank a whole pot of that over the course, which kept me awake the whole time. So maybe caffeine might be needed. The reason I tell you this is because I think it's very important for your experience. If you just casually watch it and you're on your phone half the time, then you're really not going to enjoy it as much. I think that in order to actually get the movie, you got to be fully there and devote your brain power to it. And the theater is a great place to do that. The theater makes it a lot easier to immerse yourself. But besides the immersion, the key reason why you got to watch it in the theater is also the music. The score is some of the best I've ever heard. It is truly amazing. It's just so grand and intense at times, but it can also be incredibly quiet and minimal when it wants to be. Since there's a lot of slow shots, the music is really what keeps you in. There's a long shot of a spaceship landing that lasts probably 3 minutes, and besides the background details, which are pretty impressive for the time, the score is just so big that you can't stop watching. And the speakers are what makes this all possible. It wouldn't have been such a huge impact if I could just, turn it down. The score is almost ever present throughout the entire film, so when it stops, it's like, wow. It's a sucker punch. It hits hard. One of the parts I liked the best about it was its pacing. The pacing is normally really slow, but when it gets intense, it gets really intense. One of my favorite things about long movies is the build-up. So when stuff happens, it has an impact. When you've been watching a bunch of slow shots of people on spaceships doing stuff, when the really fast stuff happens, it gets intense. Overall, a truly magical experience and something I'll never forget. Watch it in the theater.
My second favorite movie is one that not most people would expect, but this is the movie that holds my most fondest memories. The Emperor's New Groove. I know it seems odd to have a Disney movie this high on the list, considering the current position this company is in, but trust me when I say this is the most underappreciated film in their library. The Emperor's New Groove has a reputation for being Disney's funniest movie, but honestly, it's so much more than that. I was going to explain the meaning behind the phrase, Kuzco is the best Disney princess, and then talk about how this subverts the usual tropes found in most Disney movies. But recently, I found something even bigger. Kuzco loves being emperor, but uses his ruling power for all the wrong reasons, until ego finally gets to his head, and he has to face consequences for his actions. Yzma takes extreme measures, which include planning to kill Kuzco to ensure that she comes out on top. Pacha is the most selfless character that he'll even go out of his way to help someone who wants to take his home. And thanks to him, Kuzco starts to become more human even when he's still a llama. I don't think having ego is a bad thing. It's important to love yourself, and it can even be used to promote positivity and motivation, but we shouldn't let ego get to our heads heads and have it lead to affecting others in a negative way. Because it's a Disney movie, it's hard to notice this hidden meaning on first viewing, but this is still a very entertaining movie with really likable and memorable characters, a simple but fun story with really smart writing, the funniest moments of any Disney movie ever made, and of course, its beautiful traditional animation. Seriously, this style needs to come back. I have nothing against computer animation, but there's just too much of it nowadays. Anyways, this should be my favorite movie for the impact it left on me when I was younger, but alas, there is one slightly better.
Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece, Apocalypse Now, starring Martin Sheen, based off the book's Heart of Darkness. Apocalypse Now is a dive into madness. It takes place during the Vietnam War, with Martin Sheen playing a military assassin who is tasked with finding and killing a former colonel who went rogue and is camping out in the jungles of Cambodia. He descends deeper and deeper into the jungle on a military boat. Their crew includes Cleen, played by Lawrence Fishburne, who also played Morpheus in The Matrix. Fun fact, he was actually 14 at the time of recording. The entire film slowly gets more and more unsettling. From the get-go, you're put into a place of unease with the opening scene. I won't spoil it, but it's really interesting and a great place to start the film. After that, in the military base, there's a sense of comfort and secureness. It feels very safe. I think it's a good place to start because it gives a good contrast for the rest of the film. After this is the famous Ride of the Valkyries scene, where the Air Division unleashes a large airstrike on a Viet Cong town. I think this scene is honestly one of the greatest action scenes of all time. Mainly because it's just really cool to see helicopters fly around and blow stuff up with loud music. I also like it because it's a good critique of American imperialism and the military. Because at the same time that you see these cool helicopters, you also see random civilians get slaughtered along with US and Viet Cong troops. It becomes increasingly more senseless when they start surfboarding while the battle is happening. It looks like it's all just one big joke to the Americans, while the Vietnamese are fighting for their lives. It also shows us what war does to those in power. Sergeant Kilgore, a subtle name, I know, led the operation on his own whim. He just decided to attack, because why not? His troops all adore him, and he has absolute power. He does what he wants when he wants, and he knows that, so he acts like God. Both the themes of anti-war and power become more apparent after subsequent rewatches. After this, the madness truly becomes more apparent. In the next scene, they come across a military compound to refuel, and they find a Playboy performance. The whole scene feels very off. It doesn't feel like a place of security like the previous base. It feels very alien and otherworldly. Later, they visit the last bridge in US control. The scene feels like a bad nightmare. There's no sense to what's happening. The entire battle is a mess. Men rush with suitcases to the boat as they arrive, begging to leave. Lights flicker across the destroyed bridge. They look almost like circus lights. The entire time one of the crew members, Lance, is high out of his mind on LSD. It's completely absurd. And because of all that, it's probably one of my favorite scenes. In regards to the final set piece, I'll say that the build-up to it was a bit of a misdirection. I was thinking it was going to be a large confrontation and large action set piece, but it isn't. And I think that although that was surprising on first watch, on subsequent rewatches it works fine. I think the casting of Marlon Brando as the Colonel was great. It was a really good subversion of expectations. Unfortunately, to avoid spoilers, I shan't go into more detail. But I can say that even with all the problems behind the scenes with Brando, he still did a great job. The final scene with the song The End by The Doors is terrific. It perfectly uses the song at just the right moments with the editing to heighten the impact of certain actions. Probably my favorite part about the whole film is the atmosphere of the jungle and of Vietnam. It feels so alive and real. It's hard to describe the atmosphere of a film, but it's certainly there, and it's intoxicating. It definitely helped that they actually shot it in a real jungle. That mixed with the moody pacing really put me in the film. I think that one of the most interesting things about Apocalypse Now is the production and the behind the scenes. The documentary Hearts of Darkness, about the making of the film by Coppola's wife, is a perfect companion piece to the film, and is really interesting to watch. It shows how Apocalypse Now was really saved in the edit, because during the filming, they shot a ton of extra scenes and footage that they ended up cutting, for one reason or another. They really stripped it down to the essential scenes, and even with that, it's 2.5 hours. It could have been a bloated mess, and for that reason, don't watch the Redux version, or any other releases. Watch the original, it's easily the best. The rest of the versions are all way too long, and most of the scenes don't have too much point. For the final scene, they play the end for the entire 11-minute runtime. That being said, if you do love the atmosphere of the original and you want more, give it a watch. They're not that bad, but they don't hit the same levels as the original. If you're in the mood for a Vietnam film, please give this one a watch.
And my favorite movie of all time is something that I've only seen once, but it just felt natural to place it at number 1 because this movie honestly means a lot to me personally. Lost in Translation. Bob Harris is an aging movie star who travels to Tokyo, Japan to shoot a commercial. One night, when he goes to his hotel bar, he meets Charlotte, a recent college graduate who travels to Japan with her newlywed husband, but feels lonely not only because he's too busy with his job, but she feels like she hasn't found her purpose in life. What follows is a beautiful friendship told with such profound realism and emotion. The most important thing to note is that this is not a romance movie. It's about two lost souls trying to adapt in an unfamiliar environment by forming a strong bond. This movie perfectly captures both struggles of the two main characters and gives each of them just the right amount of screen time. One interesting thing to note is that this movie was written and directed by Sofia Coppola. Now, if you don't know who Sofia Coppola is, she has a reputation for her horrible performance in The Godfather Part 3. It honestly boggles my mind how she went from giving such an infamous performance to winning an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. Unfortunately, the movie didn't win Best Picture because, Return of the King came out that same year, and yeah, it deserved it. But still, this is an unforgettable experience that perfectly captures the feeling of loneliness. Lost in Translation. It's beautiful, hilarious, quiet, heartbreaking, heart-melting. It's my all-time favorite movie.
For my number one, I have Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049. Yes, 2 films in one spot. And while we were waiting for our bags, I replayed the film in my head, thinking about what it all meant. Then, on our flight back, I rewatched it again, discovering how much more there was to look at. So much more to analyze. I think it took me about 2 months or less to buy the Blu-ray for both films, and then I watched the first one on a decent-sized TV again, and my mind was blown. It was so gorgeous. Every frame was a painting that could be hung in a museum. It was one of the most stunning things I'd ever watched. Suffice it to say, the cinematography is insanely good, and probably some of the best I've ever seen. I don't think I can possibly describe the feelings I get from those shots, but here are a few from the first film. The music is something wonderful. Oftentimes, it sounds like a mix between ambient noise and music. That's not an insult. It puts the film in a dreamlike scenario when it plays. Of course, some lead more towards ambient noise and others towards the musical side. Again, it's hard to describe, but when watching, I don't think I even picked up on it. It just felt like it was meant to be there, like it was already playing in that world. The score is composed of different types of synths, so it gives it a very cyberpunk feeling. It's interesting to listen to, because on its own, a lot of the lighter tracks use the synthesized flutes that are happy and light, but there's an undercurrent of synthesized bass that weighs it down and gives it an unsettling feeling. Sometimes the melodies will consist of wind chimes or distant singing. It's very different from anything I've ever heard, and varies from track to track. Now onto the actual story. The plot itself is pretty basic. It takes place in the dystopian future of 2019, where the Earth is overtaken by cities of imaginable size. It follows Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, an ex-cop who used to hunt down replicants, which is another way of saying artificially made humans. Because the replicants are incredibly strong and dangerous, they've been banned on Earth. Deckard is then forced back into the special task force that hunts them down, because a group of replicants have come to Earth. So from there, he hunts down all the replicants. Now this sounds very intense and fast-paced, but don't set your expectations there. It's not slow, but the action scenes aren't bombastic and fast. It takes a very backseat approach, so when I was watching, it felt like I was looking through a window. It was a very detached viewing experience. I think a lot of films try and put you in the head of the protagonist, but I didn't really get that with Deckard. I understood his actions, but he's hard to relate to. He's one of the most interesting antagonists I've seen, with Roy, one of the replicants that Deckard is tracking down. I honestly related to him more than Deckard. His final monologue, Tears in the Rain, is one of the best I've ever heard. It's beautifully tragic. It was mostly written and improvised by Rutger Hauer, the actor for Roy. For some reason, I'd owned the Blu-ray to Blade Runner 2049, and it took me about 2 years to actually watch it. But let me tell you, when I did, again, my mind was blown. I had very high expectations for the sequel, and they were easily topped. 2049 had a very different feel to its predecessor. For one, the camera and shots were a lot more grounded and placed with the characters. We were more in the character's head. It was also a lot more conventional in its feel. The cinematography and atmosphere were distinctly Blade Runner, and I think it's on par with the original, but the presentation is a lot more palatable. I think one of the main reasons is the main character Kay, played by Ryan Gosling. He feels more like a main character, even though he is a replicant, which is one of the main themes of the series. That is, are replicants human or not? Because I've already talked about Blade Runner 2049 in another Movie Dude segment, I shouldn't say much more. But one of the things I found that was really cool is that the director hired a lot of foreign and unknown actors to play a lot of the supporting roles, and that he used a lot of practical sets, which really added to the feel. He really went the extra mile and it paid off big time, making the cities feel incredibly real. Like 2001, for the best experience, watch them in a theater or simulate them in your house. Both films are masterpieces of film, and I think I will never figure out which one is better.
Those are my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Now, I'd just like to say thank you so much for watching. I love this art form so much, and hopefully I've introduced you all to some really great movies. I've had a lot of fun working on the show this year, and who knows, I might even do more critiquing in the future. But until then, this is Thomas Digby from the Movie Dudes, signing off for the very last time.
Thank you, Thomas. Well, that's all we have for you this year, Chantilly. We want to thank our Chantilly staff and community for ensuring safety and education during these uncertain times. This has been Kyla Nguyen
and Bianca Campoverde, reminding you to stay positive and stay safe. We hope to see you next year, Chargers. Bye.
Bye.